All right, so let's talk about single page application, or SPAs. Right? Let's talk a little about the architecture of single page applications. So the single page applications are going to work very differently from what you might be familiar with in server side dynamic content generation. Okay, and the architecture goes something like this. You have your browser, okay, and your browser is going to go out to your server, right, requesting typically an initial page, which will be the index page, right? And this will be the only page that the browser will ever ask for explicitly. And it will only ever load this index page explicitly, right? The server will go and go into its file system. It will find the index page, and it'll respond with the index page. This is the browser here. So this is the browser, right? And this is the server. Okay. Browser sometimes we refer to as the client, right? And based on the paradigm that the infrastructure is split into two very distinct parts here, right? The client that is being used by the user, right? The user is looking at this, right? Consuming this content, is generating this request for the server, and the server is serving, right, the content back to the client for rendering. The browser copies the index page locally, and then the browser reads the file and creates an object model. It creates some object in the memory of the browser, and that object is used to then render this on the view, right? So some objects might represent a window. Some objects might represent a button. Some objects might represent some text area. So there are different objects here, right? And this object, or set of objects, we refer to it as the DOM, right, or the document object model, right? It's just in memory how the browser represents the document that you're looking at right now. It's being rendered in front of you. Okay. So this gets rendered. Now this index page is going to have references to other resources, right? It might have references to some images. Some of those images might live on the original server that this was downloaded from. So the browser parses this HTML document and sees that you have all these other references, right? So it goes and fetches them, right? It goes back and says, ooh, you want an image? It's going to go out and fetch the image from the original server. It's going to download it, and it's going to have that reference resolved. Yes? Some other references might be referencing in some other machines that are not your server. It's some other server, some other machine on the network, right, on the internet. And it's going to be downloaded from there and then used for rendering over here. Make sense? Right? Some files is going to ask, like for instance, CSS files and JavaScript files. And some of them are going to be hosted on your machine, right here, right? They're right there. They're going to be downloaded onto and copied on the client side. They're all going to be copied over in the cache of the browser. Some files, again, we're going to go out to the cloud for them. So this is the cloud. Right? Some files are out there. Download them again. Once we have everything here, the DOM is created and the page is rendered. Okay? Now, one particular JavaScript that we're going to be downloading, is going to be the entry point to our application. Right? What happens is that when JavaScript gets downloaded from the server, right, the browser immediately executes that JavaScript. Right? If that JavaScript has any variables, any functions, any whatever, right, they are immediately declared. If you have a function call, the function calls are called, and they're immediately interpreted. Okay. So what we want here, we're going to be declaring a particular file, one of these JavaScript files, the entry point, right, where our application actually begins. Right. So what happens is that at the beginning we only get the index page, right? that index page is mostly going to be empty. Mostly empty. There's almost nothing going to be in there. Right? If you visit some of the single-page applications out there today, and you open them and look at the content, the source code, right? You'll see that it's mostly empty. It says, "Where is everything? Where's my content? Where are all these images that are being displayed on the window? Why are they not in the HTML document, right?" And that's because what happens is that most of that content will be rendered dynamically, right, by the JavaScript that you download. Okay, right? So the index is mostly empty. It mostly just references other resources like CSS and JavaScript and whatnot, right? Some snippets of code that might be there. Perhaps maybe the top header, maybe the bottom footer, perhaps, right? Or something that is common across all the entire website, perhaps. But maybe sometimes not even that. Okay. So what happens here is that there's going to be one particular JavaScript content that going to be downloading, where is going to be our entry point to our application. Okay. This entry point of our application is going to do everything else, right? It's going to be generating a dynamic request back to the server saying, "Hey server, I'm waking up, right? I don't have any content. Please start providing me with the content that I need, right?" Some of them will be, if this is the home page, well, I'll need to render the home page. This app.js, based on configuration that we'll see in a minute, right, it's going to go back to the server and say, "Hey, I need the home page, home.html." Okay, all these HTML files that we're going to be looking at, all these HTMLs are not going to be meant to be standalone, full-blown HTML documents, right? Instead, they're going to be snippets. Snippets of HTML, right, that are meant to be what the name suggests, snippets, right? Some of them are going to be used for rendering this quadrant over here. Some of them are going to be rendered for rendering maybe the right-hand side ads. Some of them are going to be rendering the header. Some snippets are going to be rendered for the footer. They're going to be treated as little components, okay? Small HTML components that we can then use to paint the entire web page. That make sense? Okay? And each one can have a dedicated JavaScript associated with it, right? That can have some logic, right? Some rules here on how things are rendered. Each component is rendered. Okay? Make sense? As you interact with the application, as you click here and drag and you generate, what happens is that the user is as they interact, they generate all sorts of events, right? Of clicks and drags and mouse movements and keyboard entry points, right? As they generate events to the application, there's going to be JavaScript here who's are going to be responsible for handling all those events, okay? And some of the events might cause some elements to be added or some elements to be removed, right? And all those events need to be sent back to the server and say, "Hey, somebody added a new post, somebody removed something, or somebody's following somebody else," right? All this information is going to be sent back to the server, right? And the server will need to store all this information back in the database, right? So that we can then query this information and then dynamically re-update the content. Okay? So there's going to be a lot of chatter back and forth, but that chatter is going to be data, mostly data specific, right? We're going to be downloading snippets of HTML to paint the content, but then we're going to be going back to the server for data. We're going to be asking for JSON objects, JSON arrays of data that we can then use that data to then dynamically re-update our content. Make sense? Pretty good? All right. Obviously, the database is going to be implemented using Mongo, right? MongoDB, right? Which is a NoSQL database that NoSQL database that we're going to be using throughout the semester. Now, on the once we have this three-tier architecture, the various libraries that we're going to be using across each one of these are going to be, on the front end, we're going to be using AngularJS, right, which is going to be the JavaScript that's running on the client side. On the server, we're going to be using Node.js as the server, okay? And we're going to be using a very common and popular library, a Node.js library called the Express library. And the Express library is going to allow us to expose the data, right, as URLs, so that the browser can come and fetch the data as a URL request, right? And on the database, we're using MongoDB. And the first letters of each one of these libraries is spells out the stack that we're going to be looking at this semester, right? Which is the mean stack. So M for Mongo, E for Express, A for Angular, and N for Node.js, right? And that's the stack that we'll be focusing on for the semester. Okay, that makes sense. All right. So I think we're going to be focusing on looking at implementing a first mean application, just to give you a flavor on how is that we're going to be working on the whole semester. All right.